Hey everybody, this is DM Mike, and this is the next campaign diary for DOIP. This is going to be 2 campaign diaries. I'm going to make it short and pithy if I can. Number 8 and number 9. 9 we just played 2 days ago. We missed a week because of just illness. It wasn't COVID, just so you know, but just a typical small little cold someone had. Not me, I'm totally healthy, and I'm Superman when it comes to that. But we kind of got through that, and then of course the Oregon wildfires and things kind of got in the way. But you know what? Doesn't matter. The world can burn. We're still going to play Dungeons and Dragons. But anyway, this is going to be 2 campaign diaries. Campaign diary number 8, which was about 3 weeks ago, we finished that campaign or that session off in Phandalin, but we started in Axholm. We'd already wiped the floor with the spiders and the banshees, and the characters went through and kind of made sure there's nothing else in Axholm, but also took the time to kind of explore and get all the last remaining items. At this point, my characters were kind of higher level, so all the stuff in there really wasn't worthwhile, except for the ogre gauntlets, I think it was, or the power of ogre. I can't remember now what it's. The giants, I can't remember now. It's just it's gauntlets that are powerful. Well, they ended up giving those to the wizard. So the wizard now has like this ridiculous strength. But everything else was kind of divvied off and most likely probably sold off at some point because, you know, they're just too high level. But they kind of went through Axholm, cleared it out, and went back to Phandalin. And the rest of the session, really about 3 hours of it, was spent in Phandalin because when they got there, they realized, they let Carson know that the Axholm was clear. Now people and some members of the militia could go there and start getting it ready for people to evacuate if and when the dragon shows up. They also, the characters found out that one of the militia units had disappeared while they were gone on patrol. And so that kind of led to the rest of the events that evening. It kind of sparked the interest of Brash, who really wanted to go through and try to figure out, okay, what happened here? And the funny thing is, I had ideas I knew exactly why that patrol went missing. They still haven't quite figured all that out yet. But I knew, you know, they're missing because of X. But I didn't really think I didn't think they would actually take that thread and try to follow it through. So the funny thing was, I didn't have everything planned out. I just knew at the beginning and the end I had to make things up as we went along. It actually turned out to be really, really good. It helped me with some improv skills and actually turned out to be kind of fun. But ultimately what happened was they discovered the patrol had been taken by twig blights, which do play a small role in the story if you're running the campaign. And I changed it up. The twig blights kind of came in and stole this group. But the funny thing is, when they tried to track them, it was hard because twig blights are part of nature. They don't really leave a lot of tracks. They're very good at covering their tracks, so it was impossible almost to figure out what the heck happened to the group. Well, with a bunch of sleuthing and really super high rolls, by sheer luck, I mean, they got 1 over the DC number, and the DC number, I think, on the investigation check was like a 23 or something. It was up there. So they just barely discovered the twig blight. They found a dead twig blight up against one of the trees, and how they discovered it was, and a dagger was in its jaw, and been stabbed in the face, and they saw a glint of steel from the dagger. So they went over the dagger, pulled it out of the tree, but then realized what they were looking at was a face and was the twig blight itself. And then it just they all put it together, right? So all these twig blights had come through, and that's why it was so difficult to find the assailant. It wasn't goblins, it wasn't orcs. It was these things that looked like trees, moved like trees, don't leave a lot of tracks, and it was, just incredibly difficult to figure out. So it was a fun little evening, like 3 hours, and it feels like all that in 3 hours. Well, it was a lot of sleuthing and trying to figure things out and negotiations, and they went so far as to camp out that night to see if they could catch any more twig blights or make sure no more showed up. We had one little tiny encounter with twig vines, or the vine creatures. I can't remember now what they're called. It took longer to set that encounter up than it did to actually run it. So we only had one combat encounter that I think lasted 3 minutes with the twig blight, or whatever it is, the vine blights. Vine blights, I think that's exactly what it is. So they took care of that. Then overnight they met with Marigold, made the decision to work with her to clear what she called the summoning circle. And if they did that for her, she would show them a way or give them some unique powers to take care of the dragon. That was the deal they cut, right? So she shows up that evening, they make their decision, they make the deal, and they go to sleep that night, and that's where the session ended, right? So that was campaign number 8, session number 8. I don't remember what the natural 20s were, natural 1s, all that kind of stuff, but it was only about a 4.5 hour session. So now let's look at the past Friday we played. It was a lot of fun. I'll put the stats up here as you could see. Look at that. Look at the natural 20s. Look at the natural ones. I mean, the natural ones are incredibly high. I'm looking at my sheet here as well. The natural 20s are through the roof. This is this has to be a record for us. Good jokes, bad jokes. Actually, I have a new category down on my little sheet here. Natural 4s. I rolled 8 of them. 6 here, but I think I didn't record 2. But I just kept rolling 4s over and over again. I don't know what that deal was. Sometimes the dice are just weird. But this past session was a lot of fun. I mean, here's my outlines here. This is what I kind of use. And we really kind of went through most of this. But, I mean, 19 natural 20s and only 2 small combat encounters. I couldn't believe the amount that we had rolled. But anyway, we picked up right where we left off in the prior session, where everybody's kind of waking up in their camp. They're getting their stuff together. The night has progressed with no more enemies, no more attacks or anything like that. And so now everybody's kind of getting their stuff together to get ready to leave. They're going to travel from Fanlin with a small group that's got some supply runs that are going to Neverwinter. So they're going to escort them a little bit, about halfway there, and then they're going to take off from there and go to Logger's camp to check on Wester's brother. And the loggers camp to make sure things are safe. And then from there, they're going to go to what the summoning circle, what the witches call the summoning circle, to help her and seal the deal with her so they can get those magical powers or whatever she's promised them. This was a lot of fun. We spent about an hour in Fanlin kind of checking off boxes, getting ready to go. Big Al showed up with a bunch of horses, about 25 horses to restock Fanlin. He gave the heroes horses and ponies, whatever they needed. Now they have their own ponies and horses, so no more renting, or they don't have to buy them or anything like that. The funny thing was, Norbus decided to travel with them at this point. He's becoming a bosom buddy of the group now, and he actually had the monk right before they left teach him how to not mitigate damage, how to do that trick that monks can do, which is catching a projectile and throwing it back at the enemy. Right, a very monk skill, but Norbus wanted to learn it. He's good with the axe, but he wanted to be able to throw a weapon at somebody. So it was kind of fun, and we just had a little bit of a role-playing moment there as the monk, and I kind of left it to her, like, how would you teach this? How would you show him what to do? What is some wisdom you would depart to him? And she kept talking about, I would explain it this way, blah, blah. But one thing I definitely would say was when you catch these kind of things, what you're trying to do is mitigate damage, because you still take damage when you catch whatever it is that's coming to you, but you mitigate that damage to a certain level, I think by half or whatever. And so that was the term that came up that night, mitigate damage. So for the rest of the night, anytime the dwarf got into a fight, you could hear him off in the distance as he was slamming gnolls with his battle axe or whatnot. All you could hear him say was, mitigate damage! You know, they'd throw an axe or whatever. And he was throwing these makeshift javelins that he had made to practice with the monk. So, you know, I wanted to build in some kind of connection to the NPC, you know, start building relationship with the NPC, because he was going to be traveling with them for the rest of this time, probably towards the end of the adventure. So I feel like it's important as a DM and for players that you start to connect to NPCs. And so you got to have these quiet moments. You got to have the campfire scene where people are just talking and communicating with one another and just kind of sharing stories. You know, it's funny stuff or serious stuff. I think that's important. It may not seem that way at the moment, but when something dramatic happens, and, you know, obviously, or a death or something like that, it has impact later on. So to me, these are just the small seeds we begin to plant as characters become, you know, buddies with the NPCs. And so it was these were just important story beats that I really wanted to get through. So as they traveled from Fanlin to Neverwinter, there were some story moments. As they camped overnight, there were some story moments. As they were just setting up camp, I spent a little more time in detailing that and talking about that. And I thought it was pleasant. Is that the only word I can give to it? It was just pleasant. It was fun to kind of role play those things out. Well, obviously they made the trip. They camped near the river, about 20 miles from the loggers' camp, and overnight they were attacked by gnolls, and they were attacked while they were sleeping. Somebody was on watch. It was Rav, but Rav has a very low intelligence. And I decided to play on that evening. And during her watch, we did an intelligence check, and she rolled like a 5 or an 8. Really, really low. And what that kind of transitioned to in game was that she was distracted. She just kind of, you know, she's daydreaming. She's just not paying attention. She was watching the river and the moonlight shining off the river, and she thought she saw a crocodile kind of breach the water for a moment. She was just kind of lost there for a moment. And that's when the gnolls attacked. So everybody was surprised. And this is where I really wanted to give a feeling of being overwhelmed because the environment in D&D should feel threatening. As soon as you leave a town or a city and you start getting out to grasslands and forests, you never know what's going to happen. The gnolls ambushed them there at the camp, and it was 10 gnolls versus 4 players and an NPC, right? So they were overwhelmed. I had rolled so high on my initiative that nobody really, it was like one person at the front of the initiative, and then like 9 gnolls, and then everybody else at the end, right? So the enemy really had the upper hand, and that's what I wanted. I wanted this feeling of, oh crap, we are going to die. I can't believe this. We've gotten this far, you know? So I wanted a little bit of a feeling of overwhelmingness. But, you know, the funny thing is, I was kicking butt with the gnolls there for a little bit. And as a matter of fact, these natural 20s, a lot of those came from that encounter. But as soon as that surprise round was over, and people started to, get their turns and start to use their powers, it did change. And some people took a lot of hits. It was kind of got dicey there for a little bit, but they ultimately did destroy the gnolls. So it was another combat encounter, again, like in this whole campaign, where things really, really got by the skin of their teeth. And it was a lot of fun. So they ended up defeating the gnolls. The dwarf, Norbus, kind of went out looking for them, making sure there was no more around, and he kind of kept the watch the rest of the evening. And then from there, they left that campsite and arrived at Loggers Camp. Here's the map for Loggers Camp. This was created in Dungeon Draft. I have a small 3-minute video highlighting it. A lot of fun to do. I cut corners. It's not a one-on-one remake. I want to, I tailor these things to my tastes and my story. But as you can see here, this is where they arrived, and everything is a mess. Everything's destroyed. They can't tell exactly what's happened. There's orc arrows kind of in things. You can kind of see it there on the map, little details like that. And they kind of break into the main building, and they see a pit that's kind of broken in through the floorboards. Well, this is where something really unexpected happened. Now, if you're running this campaign, you know what I'm about to do, right? You know that these creatures are there, right? I'm not even going to try to pronounce them. The whatever the heck they are. They're there, right? But they haven't shown themselves yet. Well, there's a pit, and they're kind of in that pit inside the building. So they saw that pit. Well, the paladin decides to take a bead off his necklace of fireballs and throw it down the pit. It's just something I was not expecting whatsoever. I thought there'd be investigations. I thought they might throw a lamp down to see what's there, or they might just avoid it altogether. So for me, it was very unexpected. So with him doing that, that set off the combat counter immediately. There were 3 of these creatures down there, and they each took like 25 points of damage, all 3 of them, because of that fireball. The other ones were kind of scattered around the map. And so since that happened, I had a way I wanted to start this combat encounter. One of the Onks, or whatever they're called, they had thrown an entire tree trunk, 3 of them, that came from the forest line from one of the Onks. And of course, they didn't see it. They're all facing the building. The paladin throws a fireball in the pit, blows up almost like the side of the house. The characters are outside trying to figure out what the heck just happened. And below them, a growing shadow. Like the log is casting the shadow. It's just growing, getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And they look up, and there's these 3 tree trunks that have been thrown from one of the piles by one of the Onks. So all 3 had to make a dex check. Most of them made it except for one. Rav got crushed. Luckily, she was between the house and one of the storage sheds. She was right in the middle there. So that mitigated, the word of the night, mitigated some of that damage. And it just fell on her and those 2 buildings. So it wiped off about 1/3 of what she would have taken had she just been out in the open in that very moment. But so she had to, she lost a lot of her movement. She got hit pretty hard from this. And then, of course, this is when the Onks, I'm going to call them Onks, okay? Was the Onks all start to show up. And this actually was a fun encounter because of just how it started. Logs being tossed out of nowhere. People having to do dex checks. When they come to their feet, suddenly things are rising out of the dirt. 2 characters got dragged down into the secondary map. I'll show it here. I made this one. I put like a shadow over the top to make it look like they had been pulled down, and there's a lot of wooden debris kind of covering the hole there. It was kind of fun. But the knight, William, and I think also Brash got pulled down. I can't remember now exactly. They got pulled down into the pits, and Norbus and all them were fighting off these things. Glim grew wings or something and flew straight up to avoid the encounter. And it was a fun encounter, and it was kind of dicey too. People were taking hits, and they were being dragged and separated by the Onks. But they ultimately did destroy them in the end, and that's kind of where we ended the adventure. But it really was an entertaining combat session, because the Ankhs, you could do so much. They could be above ground, they could be below ground, they could be moving and pulling people through. It was just kind of fun to do. But guys, that is the past 2 sessions. We play again this Friday, and then we're going to take a break again. And I think, we're starting to get to those last few sessions. I have a few more prep videos to come that highlight a few more of those sessions, and then we got to get to this point where I don't want this adventure taking 9 months to get there. I really want it to be short, right? So I'm going to be cutting a little bit here and there, but we're going to start condensing and get towards the last few steps, which is, we think, facing the dragon or taking care of the dragon, whatever that means, whatever that comes to. But we're getting closer and closer. I can almost taste the end of this adventure, and it tastes like chicken. Anyway, guys, that's it. That's all I got for you. I'll see you in the next one.